Welcome back to Arkansas, where we try to make sense of the issues affecting Arkansans, and today we're going to talk about your 2022 ballot, specifically Issue 2, the Constitutional Amendment and Ballot Initiative Reform Amendment. This is a legislatively referred amendment that would change how initiatives and legislatively referred amendments work, and that could get confusing pretty quickly, so let's just dive into it. Almost every time you go to vote, in addition to people running for specific positions, there's a set of things you can vote on called issues. You may have also heard them called acts, initiative, or amendments sort of interchangeably, but the difference is important. Just like the United States, Arkansas has its own constitution, which is the highest level of law in the state. Below that, you have regular laws, also called statutes. Any regular law passed in Arkansas, whether by the whole state or a city or a county, cannot contradict the state constitution. And if that happens, the state constitution always wins. Regular laws can be passed or changed by the Arkansas legislature, just by getting a majority of votes in both the House and Senate. But if legislators want to change the state constitution, there's an extra step to the process. After the proposed amendment gets a majority vote in the House and Senate, it has to be sent to a vote by the people. And when this happens, the issue that you vote for is called a legislatively referred amendment. That's how issues 1, 2, and 3 ended up on your ballot this year. But Arkansas legislators aren't the only ones who can pass laws or amend the Constitution. If you didn't know, the motto of Arkansas is Regnant Populus, meaning the people rule. And one of the ways that we Arkansans rule is we can pass both laws and constitutional amendments without ever having to go through the legislature. To do so, you create what's called an initiative, and there are two kinds. If you want to make a new state-level regular law, it's called an initiated act. But if you want to change the state constitution, it's called an initiated constitutional amendment. To get an initiative on the ballot, you start by writing a petition, which includes the official legal language of your new law or amendment. Then you gather supporting signatures from a minimum number of registered Arkansas voters. That number is a percentage of how many folks voted in the last election for Arkansas governor, 8% to pass a regular law and 10% for a constitutional amendment. Once you get enough signatures, you have to get your petition checked by the Secretary of State and the Election Commission, who make sure all your signatures are valid and that your ballot title correctly reflects what's in your initiative. If you pass that check and aren't disqualified by any legal challenges, then your initiative will appear as an issue on the ballot in November of the next even-numbered year. Whether it's an initiative from the citizens or an amendment referred from the legislature, once it's on the ballot, it has to get more yes votes than no votes to pass, a simple majority. But Issue 2 would change that, and here's how. Issue 2 would change the number of votes required to pass initiated acts, initiated constitutional amendments, and legislatively referred constitutional amendments. Instead of requiring a simple majority, each would require 60%. And that's it. That's all it would do. But why would our legislature want to change that? The requirement that the Arkansas legislature send any constitutional amendments to the people is part of the Arkansas State Constitution of 1874. Our most recent rewrite. Meanwhile, the version of the Arkansas initiative and referendum process we operate under now was solidified in the 1920s, and it came about because a lot of Arkansans felt that the state legislature was too influenced by wealthy people and special interest groups, so the idea was that the citizens could bypass a supposedly corrupt legislature. However, as early as the 1930s, some citizens' initiatives seemed just as influenced by money as the legislature, like an amendment in 1938 which gave free land to new factories and industries. Many initiatives passed in the years since then have been backed by corporations and lobby groups, sometimes from within Arkansas and sometimes not. And part of that is because the initiative process isn't exactly something the average person can make happen without some serious financial help. Most citizens' initiatives cost a lot of money, from paying people to travel the state and gather signatures, to paying for advertisements, to paying lawyers to defend your initiative from being thrown off the ballot. But regardless of where their funding comes from, initiatives still have to be voted on by the people. And the initiative process still exists for when the people of Arkansas want something and the legislature won't give it to them. Which means that initiatives are often laws or amendments that run counter to what the party in charge of the state legislature at the time wants. Up until the 2012 election, the Arkansas legislature had been controlled by Democrats for decades. Meanwhile, citizens' initiatives had passed in 2004 banning gay marriage and in 2008 banning adoption by cohabitating unmarried couples. But in 2012, control of the legislature shifted to Republicans, and the type of initiatives initiatives that appeared on the ballots shifted as a result. In 2014, voters approved an initiated act raising the minimum wage. Medical marijuana became legal thanks to a citizens-initiated amendment in 2016, and in 2018, another minimum wage raising initiated act passed. Legislators have attempted to push back against some of these, like by carving out exemptions from the Minimum Wage Act and putting restrictions on the portions of the medical marijuana amendment that they have the authority to oversee. But their options are limited. The legislature can change or overturn an initiated act if they can get a 2/3 majority in the House and Senate. But an initiated constitutional amendment cannot be changed by the legislature unless the amendment includes language specifically allowing that. Otherwise, the only way to change an amendment is with another amendment, which has to go through the citizens again. But shortly after the second successful initiated act increasing the state's minimum wage, the legislature began passing laws and referring amendments to make the initiative process harder. Prior to 2019, the wording for the title of an initiative had to be approved by the state attorney general before you start gathering signatures. So, if your title was rejected, you could try to rewrite it and submit it again and might still have time to get signatures. But in 2019, the legislature changed things so the title wasn't reviewed until after you turned in your signatures. So if your initiative's title was rejected, you'd have no time to fix it, and your initiative would be thrown off the ballot. That same bill changed the rules so that petition signatures were no longer reviewed by the Attorney General, who all Arkansans vote for, but by the Arkansas Election Commission, which is made up of the Secretary of State, 2 positions appointed by the governor, and 4 positions appointed by the legislature. To reiterate, citizens' petitions, meant to be a check on the legislature, would be reviewed and potentially rejected by a body primarily appointed by legislators. The same year the legislature made those changes, it also referred a constitutional amendment to our 2020 ballot which would have increased the number of signatures needed to get an initiative on the ballot. But the voters rejected that proposal. So in 2021, the legislature put new rules on petition signature gathering, including expanding the things on your criminal record which make it illegal for you to gather signatures. That list now includes vandalism, simple theft, and trespassing. And during that exact same legislative session, they referred Issue 2 to this year's ballot. These changes have made a real difference to how initiatives in the state happen. For example, Issue 4 of 2022, the amendment legalizing recreational marijuana, was initially thrown off the ballot because of the changes to how petition titles are reviewed. And it only ended up back on the ballot because the state Supreme Court has ruled that those changes are unconstitutional. The state constitution always wins. Now that you know the history of the Arkansas initiative process, let's get a few more facts in place. Arkansas right now is one of 15 states that allows citizens to send both statutes and constitutional amendments to the statewide ballot. In 11 of those states, approval on initiatives requires just a simple majority. But a few states do have some extra limits. Some of those states require the measure to get a majority from the total number of people who voted in that year's election, even the ones who skipped out on voting for that initiative. Nevada only requires a simple majority, but constitutional amendments have to pass twice in 2 separate years. Meanwhile, Colorado initiatives require 55% to pass. While there are other states with higher requirements just on constitutional amendments, no state that allows for initiated acts has a threshold as high as the 60% that Arkansas Issue 2 would require. For another type of comparison, let's look at how Arkansas initiatives and referred amendments have fared since the year 2000, and how that would have changed if this 60% threshold had been in place. In that time, there have been 25 legislatively referred amendments on our ballot. There have also been 13 initiatives, 7 amendments, and 6 acts. Under the rules we have now, requiring just a simple majority, 29 of those 38 issues passed. Of those 3 kinds of issues, the referred amendments were far more likely to pass. 21 out of 25 of them are now part of our Constitution. Meanwhile, 4 out of 7 initiated amendments passed, as did 4 out of 6 initiated acts. Now, let's imagine that the 60% threshold proposed by Issue 2 had been in place the whole time. How would that have changed things? The total number of issues passed would have dropped from 29 to 17, but that drop wouldn't affect everything equally. The number of initiated acts passed would go from 4 to 3. The number of initiated amendments that passed would go from 4 to 2. And the number of legislatively referred amendments that passed would go from 21 to 12. That also gives us an easy-to-compare ratio. Under the current rules, the ratio of passed amendments from the legislature versus passed amendments from the citizens was 21 to 4. But if the threshold had been 60%, the ratio would have been 12 to 2, which is the same as 24 to 4, an increase in favor of the legislature. With that out of the way, let's move on to arguments for and against Issue 2. Some folks in favor of Issue 2 argue that right now it's too easy to change the Arkansas Constitution. The founding documents for a country or state are supposed to be harder to change than regular laws. That way, even if small things change from year to year based on shifting political and social winds, the legal foundation the place is built on can stand strong. But exactly how hard changing that foundation should be is entirely subjective. Take the U.S. Constitution. The most common way to amend it requires a 2/3 vote in the House of Representatives and the Senate, plus a yes from the legislatures of 3/4 of all states. In the 230 years since the Bill of Rights passed, only 17 more amendments have been added. Compare that to Arkansas, which has added 18 amendments just since 2008. And many of those were politically contentious, like banning gay marriage, legalizing medical marijuana, and a casino amendment that wrote specific corporations into our Constitution. These divisive issues are a reminder that making it easier to amend the Constitution doesn't just make it easier for you, but also for people you may disagree with. Some folks in favor of Issue 2 say that raising the threshold for amendments would make it less likely for reactionary policies to become part of the highest law in our state. Plus, Issue 2 applies to constitutional amendments from the legislature, too. This sets it apart from other recent attempts to change the initiative process, which only would have affected amendments from citizens' petitions, and in turn would have consolidated power within the legislature. By making amendments harder, regardless of who they come from, Issue 2 achieves the goal of a stronger constitution without weakening the citizens. Those in favor of Issue 2 might also point out that direct democracy is historically bad at protecting the rights of anyone not in the majority. For example, that 2018 casino amendment required that one of the casinos be located in Pope County. Now, voters in Pope County voted 60% against the amendment, but it received a majority of the statewide vote, so those voters were overridden on a law that disproportionately affected them. And that's not to mention the many amendments and initiatives passed by our state which supported segregation and Jim Crow laws. Some folks argue that the power of direct democracy has been used too often to deprive people of their rights, and so it should not be so easy to wield. Another argument for Issue 2 has to do with money. As we mentioned earlier, the process of gathering signatures, advertising, and legally defending a petition takes a lot of money. Ballot initiatives usually have some big donors behind them, which might not by itself be a big problem, but it does mean that the initiative process can feel less grassroots and more controlled by corporate interests. For instance, look at this year's recreational marijuana amendment. At the time of recording, still a few weeks out from the election, there had been $2 million donated to groups opposing the amendment and over $4 million donated in favor. The largest donors for Issue 4 are existing owners of marijuana cultivation sites who stand to benefit financially from the amendment passing. The advertising that kind of money can buy can make a huge difference, especially here. Arkansas has some of the lowest voter turnout in America, so it takes relatively few people to swing an election one way or the other. Altogether, this makes our state a bit of a perfect storm. A relatively low barrier to get a law or amendment passed, and a low cost to try and swing voters in your favor. Without stronger rules on where financing for these campaigns can come from, keeping it easier to get things on the ballot means it's easier for companies to buy their way onto the ballot, and potentially into the Constitution. Some folks in favor of Issue 2 say the higher vote threshold could help prevent that kind of corruption. So, if you believe the state constitution should be harder to change for everyone, or if you think the potential negative consequences of direct democracy aren't worth the upsides, or if you think that the Arkansas initiative process is too open to corrupting influences, then you'll want to vote yes on Issue 2. Now let's talk about arguments against Issue 2. Most folks opposed to Issue 2 are in favor of more direct democracy, and might say that despite any downsides it could have, it's better to risk letting citizens make bad decisions than to not let them decide at all. Many of the other arguments against Issue 2 rely on you agreeing with this idea, and in turn believing that passing amendments and initiated acts should not become more difficult. Some folks against Issue 2 argue that raising the number of required votes wouldn't actually lead to any better results. If the 60% threshold had been in place for the last few election cycles, the minimum wage increases still would have passed, but medical marijuana would not. The ban on gay marriage would have passed, but the casino amendment would not. Issues regarding taxes, term limits, and road fundings would have been a mixed bag. What differentiates an amendment that passes with 50% or 60% could be anything from the political climate of the country to money spent on advertisements to a major news event that happened the week of elections. But folks against Issue 2 argue there is no direct correlation between issues that pass with 60% or more and issues that are generally agreed to be better. For example, let's look back at 1956, when the state passed a citizen-initiated amendment to prevent federal laws about integration. That amendment passed with 61%, so even under the rules of Issue 2, it still would have become part of the Constitution. And that amendment remained part of the Arkansas Constitution until it was repealed in 1990, with barely over 50% of the vote, which wouldn't have happened under Issue 2. But that amendment was also voided by federal laws that superseded it, the very ones it claimed it could nullify. And that wouldn't be the last time that happened. There was a Citizens-Initiated Act outlawing the teaching of evolution in Arkansas, struck down by the Supreme Court. And our 2004 Initiated Act outlawing gay marriage was overruled the following year. You may have heard of the idea that states function as the laboratories of democracy. In this view, the U.S. Constitution purposely leaves some wiggle room for the states to customize their own local government, while also providing a sort of ground floor for many basic rights and freedoms. In an optimistic view, this means our state should be able to change its constitution frequently and feel comfortable allowing the people the power to do so, knowing that there's ultimately a higher law which would override some of the more harmful things that might potentially pass by popular vote. Also, many of the individuals and groups who've spoken out for Issue 2 focus heavily on making it harder to change the state constitution. Some people against Issue 2 might be in favor of that, but against increasing the difficulty for initiated acts as well. If the legislature had just wanted to make amending the Constitution harder, they could have left out the increased vote threshold for initiated acts. But they didn't. And as a result, this makes it harder for Arkansans to change not just the Constitution, but even the basic statutes of the state. Some folks argue that protecting the Constitution isn't worth crippling our power to vote on initiated acts. A final argument against Issue 2 is that, while it may affect both petitions and legislatively referred amendments, and may even seem like it does so equally, the rules for ballot initiatives creates an unequal playing field to begin with. Take, for example, the rules around ballot titles. Titles for ballot initiatives have to be reviewed for two main criteria: that they accurately describe what's in them, and that the language they use wouldn't cause someone who agreed with the issue to vote against it, or vice versa. But legislatively referred amendments don't have that limit, and there's some cases where they seem to have taken advantage of that. For example, this election cycle, the citizen-initiated recreational marijuana amendment was initially thrown off the ballot because the Election Commission said its ballot title didn't give enough details. The ballot title for Issue 4 is about 800 words long. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, there was a legislatively referred amendment whose entire ballot title was, quote, a constitutional amendment to be known as the Arkansas Term Limits Amendment and amending the term limits applicable to members of the General Assembly, unquote. That title did not indicate how the amendment was going to change those term limits, but because it came from the legislature, it didn't have to go through the same review process that a citizen's initiative would have. The Arkansas legislature not only has fewer restrictions on their amendments, but they also have other advantages, like not having to gather signatures. Because the legislature starts with these advantages, reducing the threshold for things to pass might not affect them as much as it does the initiatives. Some folks opposed to Issue 2 believe this means that an increased vote threshold for everyone is actually an unfair advantage for the legislature. So, if you believe that the benefits of direct democracy outweigh the potential downsides, or if you think that the federal government does a good job of serving as guardrails against the more extreme possible outcomes, or if you think that the math behind Issue 2 and the limitations on initiatives mean it would unfairly benefit the legislature, then you'll want to vote no on Issue 2. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe and join us on more explorations of Arkansas politics and history. You can also check out our other videos on voter issues this year. And if you want to help us create more videos like this, consider donating to Arkansans on Patreon. Patreon is the easiest way to support content makers in a way that works for your budget. You decide how much you want to give each month, and you can change that amount at any time. And bigger donations get bigger perks, including a sneak peek at our upcoming documentary about the myths and truths around the reputation of Harrison, Arkansas. And speaking of our patrons, thanks to Zach Green, Tim in Vegas, Alan Archer, Blake Hulse, Jordan Little, Madeline Applegate Gross, and Poetize with Deanna Starshine for making this video happen. Thanks again, and see you next time for more Arkansans.